I must begin with a warning. If you're reading this, it means the cylinder has already been played. Please, whatever you hear, do not let it reach the end. The voices linger. I've heard them in the gaslight hiss and in the hollow between heartbeats. Even now, when I sleep, I dream in his tone. Dr. Edmund Harrow's voice was not like other men's. It had a depth that pulled the air inward, a cadence that made the wax itself tremble. I first met him on the morning of November 12, 1892, inside Bethlehem Asylum for the mentally disordered, where London hides what it cannot explain. The carriage ride there was uneventful, gray drizzle, gaslight fog. But the moment the iron gates closed behind me, the air itself changed. The corridors smelled of camphor, damp paper, and that faint sweet rot of forgotten things. Every step echoed too long. They led me to a narrow chamber reserved for low-risk intellectuals, the kind who'd gone mad through knowledge rather than rage. The door was heavy oak, with a small brass plate that read simply, Dr. Edmund Harrow. Inside, one candle, one chair, one patient. He was thinner than I'd imagined, cheekbones sharp as knife edges, hair gray at the temples, though he couldn't have been older than 45. His wrists were marked with faint burns, like he'd handled something hot too long. But it was his eyes that held me, calm, intelligent, and unbearably tired. A phonograph sat between us, its horn pointed toward his mouth like a brass weapon. The warden gave me 1 hour. "He won't speak without being recorded," she whispered. "Says it's the only way they'll hear him properly." I didn't ask who they were. Cylinder crackles, faint scrape of chair. Transcript begins. "Dr. Harrow, thank you for agreeing to speak. I'm Thomas Vale, the London Inquirer. You understand this interview will be recorded?" Smiling faintly. "I do, Mr. Vale, I insisted on it. Memory is unfaithful, but the cylinder remembers everything. They say you were an archaeologist of some renown. Cambridge educated. Former lecturer on pre-Christian burial customs. Were. An accurate word. Reputation doesn't survive the grave, Mr. Vale." He laughed softly, the sound dry as old parchment. I noted that his fingers, long and ink-stained, were trembling, not from fear but from restraint. "You were committed after the incident at Blackmoor Manor, yes?" At that name, the air in the room seemed to contract. The candle fluttered violently, though there was no draft. Quietly, "You've been thorough. Yes, 15 years ago, 1877. I led the excavation myself. Lady Winifred Blackmoor was my patron. God rest her, if he still listens to that house. The reports were inconsistent. Some said a collapse. Others spoke of ritual mutilation. Words are clumsy things, Mr. Vale. What happened there was neither accident nor ritual. It was discovery." He leaned forward slightly, eyes catching the candlelight. "Do you believe, sir, that the dead can speak?" I remember my pulse jumping. Journalistic reflex or superstition, I can't say. "I believe in recorded testimony, Doctor. The rest is speculation." "Ah, then perhaps this will convert you." He gestured toward the phonograph, then toward the walls. "You see, they listen best when it's quiet." There followed a silence so deep it pressed against my teeth. The candle's flame tilted sideways, as though something unseen breathed beside it. Somewhere in the hall a door groaned open and shut again, but no footsteps followed. When he spoke next, his voice had softened. "Before we begin, I should confess something. I do not dream anymore. I remember. And sometimes, remembering is worse." He lifted the cylinder's lever himself. The horn quivered. "This is Dr. Edmund Harrow. Statement regarding the excavation of Blackmoor Manor, summer of 1877. Recorded November 12, 1892. I swear the instant he said the manor's name aloud, the candle hissed. There was no wind, yet the flame curved as if drawn toward the horn, as if listening. The following passage shifts in tone. Patient begins recollecting events. His language becomes more formal, descriptive, like reading from a diary. I observed ocular dilation, heart rate increase, and visible tremors in hands. We arrived at Blackmoor in the second week of June. The air itself was the color of bone. You've never seen a place so utterly stripped of birdsong, Mr. Vale. Even the insects avoided the earth there. He paused. I could hear his breath catching, the faint rasp of his tongue against dry lips. Lady Winifred greeted us at the gates. Imagine a woman sculpted from grief itself, tall, veiled, every word measured as though language might cut her. She said the manor had been her family's tomb long before it was her home. I glanced at the warden through the window slit. She looked uneasy, her fingers gripping her rosary. We set up camp by the old fountain, now a pit of dead leaves. My men joked about ghosts. Men always do until the soil answers back. He smiled faintly at his own words, then blinked as if realizing where he was. Forgive me. I forget myself when I speak of it. You may proceed, Doctor. There was a library inside the manor, untouched for centuries, dust so thick it swallowed our footprints. And in the corner, a mirror, a tall black thing covered with a linen shroud. Lady Winifred asked us not to remove it. She said it belonged to her ancestor, Matthias Blackmoor, and was best left blind. The phonograph crackled louder as if straining. I adjusted the needle. The sound that followed, faint, almost beneath hearing, was not from the machine. It was from the walls, a low, rhythmic tapping. Harrow did not seem to notice. We found the first relic on the third day, a stone tablet inscribed with a symbol no one could translate. It glistened like wet ink even under the dry light. When I touched it, the temperature dropped, only for a moment, but enough that my breath clouded. He shivered, rubbing his wrist where the faint burns were. You injured yourself handling it? No. The stone branded me. Knowledge always leaves its mark, Mr. Vale. You'll learn that before this is through. His eyes flickered toward the candle again. For a brief moment I thought I saw movement inside the flame, a shadow coiling upward, stretching thin. He blinked, and it was gone. That was when the dreams began. He stopped, looked directly at me. The candle's reflection turned his pupils to molten glass. Do you want me to tell you about them, Mr. Vale? Or would you rather sleep soundly tonight? I hesitated, then nodded. For the record, and for the story. He smiled. The candle shrank. Very well. I'll start with the first night. The sound of earth breathing. Recording ends. Cylinder stops. The doctor's voice steadied as the rain struck harder against the barred window. I adjusted the phonograph, watching the wax cylinder turn. The sound of his breath came through faintly, measured, deliberate, but carrying the weight of a man tiptoeing through memory. Blackmoor, he said, was older than any map dared to recall. The villagers near Whitby called it the house that died twice. He leaned forward then, and I could see how his pupils dilated when he spoke the manor's name. It was not mere fear. It was reverence, as though speaking of something that had once been holy and was now profane. I had been commissioned, he continued, to unearth the catacombs below its foundations. Lady Winifred believed a Roman temple had once stood there, older than the manor itself. She fancied her lineage traced to the priests of Mithras. Madness, of course, or so I thought. His fingers drummed against the iron table. We arrived in autumn 1877. The fog was so thick it seemed to have weight, like milk curdled in the air. The manor stood upon a moor of dead grass, its stones blackened by centuries of rain. The windows, God forgive me, looked like sockets, hollowed of light. He closed his eyes. The first night, we heard it breathing. I must have looked incredulous because he smiled, a small, crooked smile. You think I exaggerate, but the house breathed. Not in rhythm, but in presence, the way a deep mine exhales when its tunnels collapse. It was as if the air itself resented our intrusion. The candle on the table wavered then, though no draft entered the room. My men, Pritchard and Ellis slept by the hearth. Lady Winifred dined alone, claiming the household was in mourning for the land. She wore black even to breakfast. I remember the sound of her gown dragging along the floorboards. It whispered, not swept. He took a breath. The candlelight flared in the hollows of his cheeks. On the third day, we broke through the foundation stones. The chamber beneath was colder than the grave. I descended first with a lantern and saw what no sane man should see. I waited. He did not speak for several seconds. His throat moved as though he swallowed words too heavy to utter. There were faces carved into the walls, hundreds of them. Some Roman, some Saxon, others unrecognizable. Not mere reliefs, but lifelike, as if the rock remembered the flesh it devoured. The torchlight made their eyes glisten. He ran his hands through his hair, leaving it wild, untamed. Lady Winifred came down that evening. She said the faces were her ancestors waiting to be reawakened. When I laughed, she asked me, so calmly, that if the dead could not wake, why did the soil refuse to settle over them? The cylinder hissed softly. I felt sweat collect under my collar despite the cold. That night, he said, I dreamed of the catacombs. Only they were not stone. They were breathing. The walls pulsed like veins. When I woke, the air in my chamber reeked of salt and iron. Ellis had vanished. He paused, fingers trembling again. We found him in the morning, at the mouth of the excavation pit. His face was gray, not from death but from absence, like something had emptied him. Pritchard said he heard whispering under the floors during the night. I told him it was wind. I lied. He looked at me then, not with madness, but pity. You want truth, Mr. Vale? Truth is a weight that cracks the spine when carried too long. Blackmoor broke us one by one. The candle flickered out. In the sudden dark, I could hear only the faint scratch of the phonograph needle. Then, something impossible. From within the recording horn, faint but distinct, came another sound. A whisper. Not his. Not mine. A voice layered beneath his words, as though echoing from the pit of time. She waits. I stared at the machine, its cylinder still turning. Harrow had gone utterly still. When I finally struck a match to relight the candle, he was smiling again, serenely, horribly. Lady Winifred never left the manor, Mr. Vale, he said. She merely moved into the walls. The nurse knocked on the door just then, breaking whatever spell had fallen. Harrow did not move. I turned off the phonograph and gathered my notes, though my hands shook so badly I could barely fit the lid onto the cylinder case. Before I left, I asked quietly, Doctor, what became of Blackmoor Manor? He looked up, eyes luminous in the candlelight. It sank, he said, into the earth that bore it. But the earth never kept it. It keeps nothing now. The fog had followed us from Whitby to the moor, dense, low, and strangely deliberate, as though it meant to hide what lay ahead. It muffled the hooves of the horses, made our lamps appear as drifting embers upon the heath. I recall Pritchard, ever the pragmatist, muttering as he lashed another crate of tools to the wagon. No honest ground keeps this kind of mist, sir. It's breathin'. At the time, I laughed. I even made note of it in my journal as rustic superstition. Now, I would have called it prophecy. When we crested the ridge, Blackmoor Manor emerged from the whiteness like a wounded creature. Its towers leaned, its battlements cracked, ivy strangling the stone as though trying to reclaim it. In the distance, crows perched upon the skeletal orchard, their cries swallowed by fog. The gates were wrought iron, rusted but unbroken, and waiting before them, shrouded in a black traveling cloak, stood Lady Winifred Blackmoor. Her presence unsettled the men at once. She was no more than 30, but her pallor was like bleached bone, and her eyes, gray, sharp, reflective as glass, never quite met one's own. When she spoke, her voice carried that curious blend of grief and command that I have only ever heard from those who have lived too long with ghosts. Dr. Harrow, she said softly, you are punctual. The earth is not. I dismounted, bowed. My lady, your letter described an excavation. Not an excavation, she corrected. A reclamation. The soil remembers. It keeps what the living cannot bear. I dismissed her phrasing as eccentricity then. She led us up the broken path, past the overgrown graves that clustered around the manor walls like supplicants. I noted some marked with Latin inscriptions, others in scripts I could not identify. Inside, the manor was colder than the moor. The air reeked faintly of iron and myrrh, and the walls, every corridor, every stair, was lined with portraits. Dozens of them. The Blackmoor ancestors, I presumed, though many lacked names. The eyes of each painting were executed with unsettling realism, following us with such precision that Ellis refused to look up as we passed. "Feels like we're being counted," he muttered. Lady Winifred seemed pleased by our unease. "They watch over the house," she said. "They are listeners. You will grow accustomed." We were shown our quarters, Pritchard and Ellis in the servants' hall, myself in a room adjoining the study. That night, as I prepared my notes, I heard movement above the ceiling, faint dragging like fabric on stone. Yet no one else resided there but Lady Winifred. We began digging the next morning in the eastern courtyard, where the stones had sunk irregularly into the earth. The soil was heavy, black with moisture, and clung to our boots as though reluctant to release what it concealed. By noon, Pritchard's spade struck something hard. We cleared the soil to reveal a fragment of obsidian, smooth, cold, and perfectly shaped, as though cut by no tool known to man. Lady Winifred appeared behind us, her cloak trailing in the dirt. "You have found the first vein," she said. "The heartstone lies beneath." Her certainty troubled me. When I asked what she meant, she only smiled. "Every family is a vessel, Dr. Harrow. Mine has long been sealed. You will open it." That evening, I documented the find in my journal. Unearthed, fragments of volcanic glass, approximately 6 inches in width. Texture unnatural, smooth on all sides, no striation. Emits faint warmth when held. The lady insists it marks a tomb older than the manor foundations. At supper, we were served broth so pale it might have been drawn from stone. Lady Winifred spoke little, but her gaze lingered on the window where the fog pressed like gauze. She asked about my work in Egypt, my study of pagan burials. I told her of relics found beneath the Valley of Kings, altars carved before dynasties began. "Ah," she murmured. "So you have seen what sleeps when the gods abandon their worshippers." Her tone was neither curious nor skeptical. It was familiar. That night I dreamed of water beneath the earth, clear and motionless, reflecting faces that were not my own. The next day, Ellis unearthed what at first appeared to be a rusted plate of iron, buried 3 feet deeper than the obsidian vein. Upon closer inspection, we realized it was a tablet, its surface etched with symbols no one among us could decipher. "Not Latin," I muttered, brushing the dirt away. "Nor Greek," said Pritchard. "Older," whispered Lady Winifred, appearing once more without a sound. She crouched beside me, fingertips tracing the corroded edges. "You will find the mouth of it soon. When you do, step carefully. It does not like to be woken." I frowned. "It, my lady?" "The one below," she said simply. Her gaze flickered toward the manor's foundations, and for a moment, just a moment, I thought I heard something deep beneath the ground, a vibration rather than a sound, as though the earth had sighed. That evening I wrote again. "Tablet composition uncertain. Appears iron alloy, possibly meteoric. Symbols suggest pre-Christian ritual design. Local folklore implies the manor built atop plague pit, 1348 AD. Yet structure of vault implies something older, Roman, perhaps Druidic. Lady Winifred claims familial duty to preserve the resting place, advises caution, lest it remember our intrusion. She speaks as though it were sentient. At midnight, I awoke to find my lantern burning low and the sound of whispering beyond my door. Voices, too low to distinguish, yet distinctly plural. I opened the door. The corridor was empty, but the air moved. It was not a draft, but a slow, deliberate exhale, as though the house itself had lungs. The portraits along the wall seemed nearer than before, their painted eyes glistening with fresh varnish. As I turned, something caught my sleeve, a thread snagged upon the nail of a doorframe. Only when I freed it did I realize the thread was wet. I held it to the lantern flame, crimson, fresh. From where I do not know. The following morning dawned without a sunrise. The fog had thickened overnight into a weightless wall that turned the moor into a world of its own. Even the crows had gone silent. Pritchard was pale, his hands shaking as he stirred the morning coals. "Someone walked through camp last night," he said. "Boot prints, but not ours. Too small, too deep." Lady Winifred appeared moments later, as if summoned by the words. She moved soundlessly across the courtyard, her face as unreadable as marble. "It is not the living who walk here," she said. "Do not mistake them for us." Ellis crossed himself. I reprimanded her superstition aloud, but inwardly, I began to feel it too. By midday, we had cleared another 3 feet of soil beneath the iron tablet. What we found then was neither wall nor coffin, but a doorway, sealed with stone slabs fitted so perfectly no mortar could be seen. At its center was the same sigil as the one etched into the tablet, a spiral of thorns surrounding an open eye. Lady Winifred's voice trembled when she saw it. "The threshold," she whispered. "It still remembers her name." I asked whose name she meant, but she did not answer. That night, while the men slept, I examined the symbol by lantern light. The air around it felt colder, as if the stone radiated its own frost. When I brought the flame near, the lantern guttered and went out, though no wind touched it. And then, impossibly, the sigil began to glow. A faint red shimmer like iron fresh from the forge. It faded as quickly as it came, leaving the air charged with the scent of burnt earth. I did not sleep after that. At dawn, Lady Winifred insisted we open the seal. "Whatever sleeps there," she said, "has waited long enough." Ellis refused. Pritchard muttered about curses, refused his shovel, and demanded we leave. The lady turned to him calmly. "Then you will dig with your hands," she said. "The land answers only to those who serve it." Something in her tone silenced him. We set to work. The first slab came loose with effort. Beneath it, darkness so absolute it seemed almost solid. The air that escaped was stale, metallic, and wet, as if we had broken the skin of the earth itself. When the final stone fell away, our lanterns flickered violently, and we saw the staircase descending into the black. It spiraled downward in perfect symmetry, each step slick with age. The walls bore carvings, no saints or crosses, but twisted shapes, figures kneeling backward, faces turned inside out. Pritchard whispered, "That ain't no Christian place." I should have stopped then. I should have sealed it again. But curiosity is a cruel god. I lit a fresh lantern and descended first. The air below was colder still. I could taste iron on my tongue. The stair ended in a circular chamber carved entirely of stone. In its center stood a sarcophagus, unlike any I had seen, taller than a man, shaped almost like a cocoon. Its surface was smooth, save for faint indentations that resembled ribs. Around it lay offerings, shattered urns, fragments of bone, and lengths of black glass that pulsed faintly in our light. Lady Winifred descended last. Her voice trembled with something like awe. "This is where she slept," she said. "Who?" I demanded. "The first of us." Her hand brushed the sarcophagus, and every lantern went out. The darkness was absolute. Pritchard cursed, fumbling for a match. In that moment of blind panic, I felt it. Movement. Slow, deliberate, from within the stone. Not the crumble of settling rock, but the gentle, unmistakable shift of something turning in its sleep. When the lights flared back, Lady Winifred stood very still, her hand pressed flat against the lid. Her lips moved, though I heard no sound. Then she smiled, cold, exultant. She remembers me. The stone shuddered beneath her palm. A hairline crack split the surface, and a fine mist escaped, smelling of decay and myrrh. I grabbed her arm. "My lady, this is madness." "No," she said, her eyes reflecting the lantern light like mirrors. "It is inheritance." We fled the chamber then. Pritchard first, Ellis stumbling behind him. I forced Lady Winifred up the stairs as the ground trembled beneath us. The moor outside had gone silent. Not even the wind dared move. When we reached the courtyard, the fog had thickened to blindness. The manor windows glowed faintly, though no lamps burned within. And from the pit behind us, faint but certain, came the sound of something breathing. I made this entry that night by candlelight. It was no Christian grave we unearthed, but something far older and less patient. Lady Winifred spoke of it as though it were kin. The symbols appear to mark imprisonment, not sanctity. If so, our excavation has become desecration. I have instructed the men to leave at dawn, yet the fog shows no sign of lifting. Perhaps it never will. The fog did not lift. It pressed itself against the manor windows like an animal longing to come inside. By the third morning, Ellis had gone pale and refused to descend the stairs. Pritchard whispered of movement beneath the soil at dawn, of a sound like fingers scratching wood. I dismissed him, but the tremor in his voice lingered in mine. Lady Winifred, however, appeared unaffected. She took her breakfast in silence, eyes fixed upon nothing, as though listening to something far away. When I asked if she slept, she smiled faintly. "Sleep is for the forgotten," she said. "We remember." It was then that I decided to search the manor's archives. If there was reason to her madness, I would find it in the house's records. The library lay at the west end of the manor, a high vaulted hall lined with oak shelves and dust so thick it dulled every beam of light. My lantern carved a narrow path through it. Books older than empires sagged against one another. Treatises on anatomy, alchemy, and theology, written in Latin, Greek, and tongues that looked carved rather than written. I spent hours turning pages until, behind a false panel in the desk, I found a thin volume bound in blackened leather. Its cover bore the sigil I had seen on the iron tablet, the spiral of thorns and the unblinking eye. Inside, in cramped, slanted script, was written, "The Ledger of Matthias Blackmoor, 1645–1689. The ink had browned to rust. Margins were filled with annotations in another hand, perhaps Lady Winifred's. The first entry read like a confession. "We have found the means to endure beyond the grave. The essence does not flee with death. It lingers in the cavity of the breath. The host must drink the breath of the buried to remain among the living." I felt my throat tighten as I read on. "We bind the essence within iron, for the metal remembers the soul's weight. The blood is but the vessel. What dies may speak again if one listens beneath the earth." There were diagrams, anatomical sketches of the human chest, lungs drawn open like bellows, surrounded by inscriptions. One figure bore the title, "Vessel of Inheritance." In the margins beside it, Winifred's hand had added, "The mother preserves what the son forgets." I shut the ledger, my heart hammering. This was no ordinary necromancy. It was parasitic resurrection, the breath of the dead consumed by the living. Not life renewed, but stolen. As I returned to my quarters, I heard shouting in the courtyard. Pritchard and Ellis were outside, packing their things by lamplight. The horses whinnied, eyes rolling white in the fog. "We're done, sir," Ellis cried. "The ground talks. We heard it, clear as bells. It called our names." Pritchard nodded, his face gray. "There's something moving under the pit. Breathing, talking, ain't human." Before I could speak, Lady Winifred stepped from the doorway. She wore no cloak, though the wind tore at her gown. "If you leave now," she said, her voice low, "you will not find the road. The moor does not release its guests." Ellis backed away, trembling. "Then I'll take my chances." He ran. Pritchard followed, their boots vanishing into the mist. We listened to their footsteps fade. Then silence. Then, one faint cry, cut short. Winifred did not move. Her eyes reflected the lantern light as still as mirrors. "The land has taken its due," she said softly. "It remembers loyalty and the lack of it." I turned on her. "What are you, madam? What curse binds this house?" Her gaze met mine, and for a moment, I saw it. Something vast moving behind her pupils, like the shadow of a second face. "My family does not rest easily," she said. "We breathe because they breathe. We endure because they are never truly gone." She reached for me, her fingers cold as stone. I recoiled. "You've read the ledger," she whispered. "Then you know what waits beneath. You've woken her heart, Dr. Harrow. The house feeds again." She turned away, walking into the fog, her silhouette dissolving until only her voice lingered. "Do not listen when they call you by name." I barricaded myself in the library that night. The fog had begun to seep through the cracks in the windows. The fire burned low, and every breath echoed in my ears like another's beside me. I opened the ledger again, hoping reason might dispel fear. Instead, I found the final entry. "The covenant complete. The mistress will rest in stone until the stars change their course. The bloodline shall remember her hunger. The walls shall keep her name until the end of breath." Below it, in fresher ink, Winifred's hand again. "The stars have changed." Then faintly, beneath that, a smear of dried red as though from a fingertip. Past midnight, the house began to stir. The portraits along the walls sighed as though exhaling. The floorboards pulsed beneath my feet. And from deep within the earth, beneath the courtyard, where we had opened the pit, came a sound I will never forget. The long, slow inhale of something waking after centuries of silence. It was not wind, it was breath. I staggered back from the window as the fog pressed against it like flesh, forming faint impressions, mouths, faces, gasping. My lamp flickered and went out. In the darkness, I heard footsteps above me. Not walking, circling. Then her voice, muffled but close. "She remembers your name, Dr. Harrow." I fled the room, through corridors alive with whispering portraits, through stairwells that twisted like ribs until I reached the courtyard. The fog there glowed faintly red. The excavation pit had widened, as though the earth itself had split open. And standing at its edge was Lady Winifred. Her hair moved though there was no wind. "It is done," she said quietly. "The breath returns to its vessel." I stared into the pit. There was movement, a figure, pale, eyeless, crawling upward from the dark. Its body shimmered like glass, ribs visible beneath translucent skin. I turned to run, but Winifred's voice stopped me. "You brought her the light," she said. "Now she will see again." I remember little after that, only that the fog swallowed the manor whole. When I woke, I was in the marshes. Days later, my hands caked in black soil. The manor was gone. Only the pit remained, and from it, a single sound rising with the dawn wind, a long, slow, contented breath. That I had fled, that I had escaped into the marshes, but the fog had circled me back, and when the morning came, I stood once more before the Blackmoor gates. I told myself it was delirium, exhaustion, or madness. Yet the iron gate was open, swinging gently on its hinges, as if expecting me. And so I entered again. The manor was hollow now. No sound of servants, no sign of Lady Winifred, only the smell of damp stone and candle wax. The portraits were veiled in mildew, their faces blurred as though the house itself had tried to forget them. In the main hall, I found the cellar door ajar. A trail of wet footprints led down. I descended with a lantern and pistol, though I doubted either could defend me from what dwelt beneath. The cellar steps spiraled into blackness, older than the house itself, carved stone, slick with age. I counted my breaths as I went. After 30 steps, the air grew colder. After 50, I began to hear it, a low, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat far beneath the earth. At the bottom lay the wine cellar, or what had once been one. Barrels rotted in their racks, leaking tar-like residue. The floor had collapsed near the far wall, revealing a hollow beneath. In the broken earth, half buried under debris, was a stone hatch. The seal was carved with symbols identical to those in Matthias Blackmoor's ledger, concentric rings and curling sigils that seemed to shift when I looked too long. The hinges were iron, but the metal had not rusted. Someone, or something, had preserved it. As I knelt, I noticed a narrow groove along the rim of the hatch, filled with hardened red resin. Not wax, not paint, something thicker. I thought of Winifred's words. We breathe because they breathe. Perhaps this was where the family's breath was kept. I fetched a crowbar from the wall and began to clear the debris. Each strike sent dull echoes down the corridor, as if the house were listening. When at last I forced the bar beneath the edge, the hatch groaned open with a sound like an exhalation, the release of something that had waited too long to breathe. The smell that rose was not decay but cold, a scentless chill that seemed to draw heat from the air itself. I held up my lantern and saw a narrow stair descending into stone darkness. The steps were worn by centuries of feet. The air below shimmered faintly, not with moisture but with motion, as though something unseen shifted through it. Still, I descended. The stairs ended in a vast chamber, circular and perfectly symmetrical. The lantern light caught walls etched with endless spirals and names, thousands, maybe more, carved in hands of varying ages. At the center lay 7 sarcophagi arranged in a ring. 6 of them stood open, their lids slid aside. The 7th remained sealed, wrapped in black chains that crossed it like ribs around a heart. The 6 open coffins were empty, yet not entirely. Each contained a faint residue, like frost on glass. When I leaned close, the frost pulsed once and vanished. My breath came faster. Each sarcophagus bore a plaque. Elias, Margaret, Theodore, Rosalind, Jonas, Winifred. But the 7th had no name, only an inscription carved deep into the lid. The letters were older than Latin, the script angular and jagged, like wounds in the stone. The ledger's glossary offered a translation. Do not speak its name. I circled the sealed tomb, every instinct screaming to leave. Yet something compelled me, the same compulsion that had brought me back to the manor, that made my pulse echo the slow heartbeat beneath the floor. The chains were wrought from black iron that glistened as if wet. I traced one with my gloved hand. It was warm to the touch. Then as I brushed away dust from the inscription, my glove tore on a shard of stone. The cut was shallow, but my blood fell directly into the groove of the carved words. The moment it touched, the inscription glowed faintly red. A vibration shuddered through the floor, not violent, but alive. The chains shifted, releasing a soft metallic sigh, as though they had exhaled after centuries of silence. My lantern flickered. The air thickened. The temperature rose several degrees in an instant. I staggered back, clutching my hand. The wound throbbed, not from pain, but from some deeper resonance, as if my heartbeat were being echoed from beneath the coffin. I heard a whisper then, faint, feminine. Harrow! I spun, the light quivering across the chamber walls. No one. The sound had come from inside the sealed sarcophagus. I took a step closer. The chains trembled. Dust rose like breath. Harrow. The voice again, clearer, almost tender. You sought the truth. Every rational thought screamed that it was imagination, that sound could not come from within a stone vault. Yet I felt it, vibration through the air, through my bones. The voice continued, soft and measured, the syllables heavy with age. We remember your name. You read the ledger. You woke the breath. Lantern light caught the carvings on the other coffins, and I saw, to my horror, that each lid bore new scratches. Fresh claw marks. I raised the lantern higher. Shadows twisted, converging toward the sealed tomb as though drawn by it. "Free me," the voice whispered. "The breath is yours. The life is ours." The air pulsed once more, and the flame dimmed until the chamber was bathed in darkness, save for the red glow bleeding from the engraved words. Something beneath the coffin stirred, a slow, rhythmic push against the lid, the stone shifting by mere inches. I stumbled back, tripping over one of the open sarcophagi. My lantern fell, its glass shattering. Darkness swallowed everything except that faint crimson light. From it came the faint sound of breathing, not one, but 7. Each inhale drawn from the same source, each exhale synchronized, a single organism remembering how to live. Then beneath it all, a deeper voice, the echo of the voice that had called my name, spoke only one phrase: "The blood remembers." I fled up the steps, blood pounding in my ears. The air behind me grew hotter, wetter, like the breath of something enormous. When I reached the cellar again, the hatch slammed shut with such force that dust rained from the ceiling. I turned, panting, staring at the sealed stone. The grooves glowed faintly through the cracks. The words, "Do not speak its name," burned like embers. And from below, the last whisper followed me, soft enough to be imagined, but too clear to dismiss. "You already did." When I reached the ground floor, dawn was breaking beyond the frost-clouded windows, yet the light did not seem to touch the manor. It merely stood there, pale and useless, as though it too feared to cross the threshold. My hand, the one that had bled upon the seal, had gone numb to the wrist. The veins pulsed faintly with a dull red glow beneath the skin, vanishing each time I blinked. I wrapped it in linen, but the fabric dampened instantly, not with blood, but with condensation, as though the flesh beneath breathed on its own. Every sound in the manor seemed amplified, the groan of timber, the whisper of curtains shifting though no wind passed through. The house was awake, and it knew my name. I found the grand hall empty. The mirrors that had once reflected endless corridors of candlelight were veiled now in dust and darkness. Only one mirror remained uncovered, the tall, cracked one near the staircase. And in it, for a moment, I saw Lady Winifred standing behind me. Not as she had been, poised and luminous, but dim, her form blurred at the edges, her eyes black as ink. I turned, heart pounding. No one there. When I looked back, her reflection still remained, lips moving in silence. Then the mirror fractured down the center with a sharp, clean crack, and her face vanished. I don't remember falling, but I found myself kneeling beside the mirror shards, my breath fogging the floor. Each piece reflected the same thing, my own face. Yet in every reflection I was older, thinner, and the wound on my hand had spread further up my arm. From behind the walls came the muffled thrum of that buried heartbeat again, slow and steady, matching my pulse. I stumbled toward the library, the last room where reason had once seemed possible. The ledger lay open upon the desk where I had left it. But the ink on its pages was no longer black. It had turned a deep bruised crimson. The final entry, one that I knew had not existed before, now read, "The seal is open. The 7th sleeps no more." As I stood there, the door creaked open. Lady Winifred stepped through, but she did not walk. She drifted, her gown whispering across the floor without touching it. Her face was pale beyond death, her eyes 2 dim lanterns flickering with faint red light. "Dr. Harrow," she said, voice calm and steady, as if addressing me across a dinner table. "You have done what none of my line dared." I could not speak. She came closer. The air grew colder around her, though no breath fogged before her lips. "We were not cursed," she continued softly. "We were preserved. The world above forgot the old covenants. But you, She touched my bandaged hand. The linen hissed as though burnt. "You remembered for us." Her fingers were cool and dry, like pressed flowers. Beneath her touch, the glow in my veins brightened, pulsing with each of her words. "Where are they?" I whispered. Her gaze drifted toward the floor, listening. At that moment, a faint tremor ran through the house. The portraits in the hall shifted slightly, each canvas groaning on its frame. The eyes of the ancestors turned toward us. Winifred tilted her head, listening to something I could not hear. Then she smiled, faint, distant. "They want to breathe again." I stumbled backward. What did I release? Her smile faded. "Not release, remembrance. You opened the mouth of our memory." The floorboards creaked beneath my feet. Dust fell from the ceiling like ash. She looked up, almost reverently. "They come." The candlelight guttered out, and from the darkness came a series of hollow knocks. Not from the door, but from below, through the foundation. 1, then 2, then 7. Each knock resonated through my bones like a drum. Winifred's eyes rolled back. Her body stiffened, trembling, as though strings pulled her from within. Her voice rose, overlapping itself, a dozen tones speaking in harmony. "The chain remembers the hand remembers the vein, the blood remembers the name." The temperature dropped so fast my breath turned to mist. The windows cracked, frost spidering outward in intricate veins. The floor beneath her feet split open in a jagged line, revealing a faint red glow below. From that fissure came a sound like breathing, slow and deep. She turned her eyes back to me, tears of blood welling at their corners. "The seventh does not sleep." Then she fell silent, and her body collapsed inward like smoke, leaving only her gown crumpled on the floor. I ran. Through corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly, doors leading to rooms that had not existed before. The air reeked of cold metal and wet stone. Every shadow looked like her silhouette, every echo like her whisper. I reached the entrance hall at last, but the doors would not open. The iron handles burned like ice beneath my grip. Behind me, the hallway lights flickered one by one. Then, from somewhere deep within the walls, a voice, not hers this time but mine, spoke back at me. "You cannot leave what you have joined." The words reverberated through the stone, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. The manor was alive. I knew it then. It was not merely haunted. It was the haunting. The seventh sarcophagus had not contained a corpse, but a consciousness. The memory of the Blackmoors themselves preserved like seed within a tomb. My blood had fed it, given it form. And now it was awake. I remember little after that. A brightness, red then white, flooding the hall. The sensation of being pulled backward as though my mind had slipped from my skull. Whispers filled my head, 1,000 voices murmuring the same name, Harrow. When I awoke, it was morning. I was lying in the garden beside the manor's well, my lantern extinguished, my hand entirely black from wrist to elbow. The manor stood silent behind me. Doors sealed, windows shuttered, smoke curling faintly from the chimneys, though no fire burned within. I did not look back. Sound of breath caught on cylinder recording silence. Then Thomas Vale's voice. "Dr. Harrow, are you saying Lady Winifred was alive?" "No, not alive, but she remembers how to be. And this, seventh, it was never a person." He pauses. "It was a door, and you opened it." "I did not open it, Mr. Vale. It opened me." The recording distorts, faint static swelling into the shape of breathing. The last audible sound, Harrow whispering a single word, barely caught by the cylinder. "Winifred." Then the tape ends. Audio cylinder 4, recovered from London Asylum, 1892, partial transcription by journalist Thomas Vale. The phonograph sputtered when I placed the fourth cylinder. The first 3 had been merely unsettling. His voice tired, fevered, occasionally trembling. But this one began with a noise that was not his, a low hum, like wind through a hollow pipe or breath. Then, Harrow's voice, deeper, slower, as if his throat had been filled with mud. I remember the corpse now, clearer than I should. The words crackled with static. I adjusted the needle. A faint thunder murmured in the background, though I could not tell if it was the recording or the storm that gathered outside the asylum walls. We found it beneath the 7th lid. It was not dust nor bone nor rot. It was intact, perfectly preserved, the skin pale as candle wax, the mouth slightly open, as if in mid-breath. The teeth gleamed like ivory, unblemished by time. A pause. Then the sound of dripping water, perhaps from his lantern. I touched its chest, only once. The heart twitched. Once. The phonograph needle shuddered. The cylinder stuttered, but the sound that followed was unmistakable. A faint, wet thump, rhythmic and hollow. My hand froze above the machine. That heartbeat was not mechanical. Static intensifies. Faint murmuring overlaps the voice track. When I woke, Harrow continued, voice shaking now, I was outside the crypt, my hands blackened. The flesh cracked as if burned. Lady Winifred stood above me. A pause, a rustle, like silk over stone. Then, clear as breath against the horn. You shouldn't have gone down there, she whispered. Now it knows you. Even through the distortion, her tone was perfectly calm, intimate, almost affectionate. Then silence. Long, pulsing silence. I stopped the recording. The asylum felt too still. The rain on the windows sounded like fingers tapping in sequence. 1, then 2, then 7. Dr. Harrow sat opposite me, his wrists bound loosely to the chair. His eyes were closed, lips moving faintly in rhythm with the sound of the storm. Dr. Harrow, I said, voice low, do you recall this recording? He did not answer. His head tilted slightly, as though listening to something behind the walls. I rewound the cylinder a few seconds and let it play again. The whisper came once more, Winifred's voice. Now it knows you. Harrow's eyes snapped open. The transformation was immediate. He inhaled sharply, too sharply, as if he'd forgotten how to breathe. The veins in his neck darkened. His pupils dilated until the iris vanished. He spoke, but it was not entirely him. It doesn't know names, Mr. Vale, only voices. I froze. What does that mean? He smiled faintly, the kind of smile a corpse might wear in a dream. It listens through us. It remembers through whoever hears. I turned off the phonograph. The silence rang louder than any noise. It was then I noticed the faint sound of breathing. Not from Harrow, not from me, but from the phonograph itself. The cylinder was still spinning. I lifted the needle. The breathing continued. A long inhale, a long exhale. Harrow began to laugh, softly, brokenly. Do you see now? He said. It doesn't die. It travels. He strained against his bindings. The leather creaked. They thought it was buried, but memory doesn't stay buried. It only waits for a voice. I stepped back. You're not making sense. Aren't I? He leaned forward, the lamplight catching the wet sheen on his blackened hands. Do you think I recorded this for myself? It wanted to be heard. That's how it moves, through sound, through repetition. I glanced at the phonograph, the horn trembling as if something inside it were breathing harder. Dr. Harrow, I said carefully, what did you bring back? He stared at me for a long time, then quietly, a mirror that remembers, and now it's looking at you. The lights flickered. A gust of wind slammed the shutters open. Outside, the asylum yard was empty, yet the lanterns swayed as if someone walked among them. The cylinder still turned, though I had removed the needle entirely. The grooves shimmered, glistening faintly red. From within the machine came a sound, a single word, whispered in Lady Winifred's voice. Harrow. And then beneath it, an echo that followed a heartbeat later. Vale. The room went silent. Thomas Vale's transcript, later entry, written in his journal. I cannot explain the phenomenon rationally. There is no electrical trick capable of producing such resonance in a wax cylinder. Yet I know what I heard. After the recording ceased, Dr. Harrow sat perfectly still for several minutes, his gaze unfocused. Then, softly, "It wants to speak again." The storm outside intensified. The ceiling leaked. The attendants knocked, asking if I required assistance. I dismissed them. I turned back to Harrow. He was no longer bound. The straps lay cut beside him, the metal clasps warped. "Dr. Harrow." He did not answer. His chair was empty. But the phonograph still played, though the cylinder had stopped spinning. From it came faint, layered whispers. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, all murmuring fragments of names, each dissolving into the next. Winifred, Harrow, Vale. The voices grew louder until they merged into one continuous sigh. I reached to stop the machine, but before I touched it, the lamplight dimmed, and a reflection appeared in the glass window behind the desk. It was not mine. It was Harrow's, standing directly behind me. His face was pale, eyes hollow, lips parted as if mid-speech. But there was no sound, only the soft, rhythmic breathing, from the phonograph, from the walls, from everywhere at once. Then the whisper came again, near my ear this time, as if the speaker were inches away. "Now it knows you too." I tore the cylinder from the machine, threw it into the fireplace. The wax hissed, melting, releasing a faint red vapor that rose like smoke. But before it burned away completely, I heard, just once more, beneath the crackling fire, "You cannot burn what remembers." The whisper was Harrow's and mine at the same time. The same. The fire had long gone out. Only ash remained, pale and cold, yet the air still smelled faintly of burning wax, and of something older, something breathing. I sat motionless at the desk, watching the melted residue harden into a dull crimson film upon the grate. The phonograph, though shattered, still quivered faintly. The brass horn trembled, expanding and contracting, like lungs struggling for air. I wrote that movement off as heat distortion, a nervous illusion. But the moment I turned away, the horn exhaled. A dry, whistling sigh that extinguished the final coal in the fireplace. And then the asylum fell utterly silent. There is a kind of quiet that feels less like absence and more like attention. That was the quiet which filled the room. Somewhere in the corridor, a door creaked open. Footsteps, bare, slow, deliberate, padded across the stone floor. I reached for the lantern, but the wick refused to catch. I whispered to myself that it was only a patient, a wanderer, some poor soul lost in the night. Yet the footsteps stopped outside my door and did not move. "Who's there?" I asked. Silence. Then, 3 slow knocks. I froze. 3. Not 1, not 7, but 3. The same rhythm that marked the beginning of Harrow's earlier recordings. I waited for the sound to repeat. It didn't. Only the whisper of rain against the window returned. I forced myself to open the door. The corridor stretched empty, dim lamps flickering at intervals. No sign of movement, no sound save the drip of water from the ceiling. But across the opposite wall, scrawled in ash and condensation, was a phrase that made my stomach clench. "The breath remembers." Each letter shimmered faintly red, as if still warm. I stepped closer. The writing began to fade, not like chalk washing away, but like ink being drawn back into the wall itself. Behind me, the phonograph began to hum again, though it had no cylinder left. When I returned to the study, I found Dr. Harrow's chair no longer empty. He sat there again. Or rather, something sat there, wearing his shape. The body was too still. The head tilted slightly to one side, eyes open, lips parting in an expression that might have been relief or death. "Dr. Harrow," I whispered. The figure blinked. The movement was slow, deliberate, the way an automaton might mimic life. He smiled. The teeth gleamed faintly in the dim light. "You see, Mr. Vale?" he said, voice echoing slightly, as though coming from two throats at once. "You burned the recording, yet I remain." I took a step back. "How?" "Because you heard it. Because you remember." The thing rose from the chair, joints cracking softly, not with pain, but with ancient stiffness. The air around him warped, faint heat waves distorting the edge of his figure. "It doesn't live in words. It lives in recollection, in the space between sound and silence." He extended one blackened hand toward me. The skin was fissured, as though light leaked through the cracks. "Touch me and you'll understand." I refused. "Then it will touch you anyway." I fled the study and bolted down the corridor. Every lamp along the hall burst as I passed, each shattering with a hiss like exhaled breath. The air itself grew thick, heavy, humid, metallic, as though I were running through the lungs of something vast. When I reached the atrium, the asylum's great clock struck once, though it was far past the hour. The pendulum hung motionless. Then, across the far end of the hall, I saw Lady Winifred Blackmoor. She stood barefoot on the tiles, hair unbound, her gown trailing water as though she had walked from the sea. Her skin was flawless, unmarred by time. Only her eyes betrayed her, dark pits glowing faintly red at the core. She smiled. "He showed you," she said. "Now you are part of it." "What is it?" I demanded. "A memory that learned to breathe." She tilted her head, listening to something beyond us, a distant, steady rhythm that might have been thunder or a heart. "It doesn't want death, Mr. Vale. It wants continuity." Her gaze sharpened. "It wants listeners." I took another step backward. "Why me?" "Because you listen. You've always listened. That's what you do, isn't it?" She smiled faintly. "You make others hear." I felt the floor tremble. The tiles beneath her feet began to crack, spreading in a slow, deliberate pattern like veins. From each fracture seeped a thin mist, red, then black. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. And I did. A deep, resonant hum rising from below, the same pulse I'd heard in Harrow's recordings. The manor, the tomb, the sealed chamber. It was all beneath this place. The asylum had been built upon its remains. I turned and ran again, stumbling through the ward corridors. Every door I passed bore names etched in iron. Matthias Blackmoor, Elias, Rosalind. They weren't inmates. They were the lineage. The walls throbbed faintly with red light, as though blood pulsed behind the plaster. When I reached the stairwell, I saw Harrow once more below me, standing at the base, head tilted back. "You see now?" he said softly. "It never left. The manor grew around it. The family became its flesh." He extended his hand. "And now you are among us." I backed away. "I am not one of you." "No," he agreed. "But you will be remembered." The stairs behind me dissolved into shadow. I had nowhere to run. From every direction came breathing, hundreds of synchronized breaths, filling the corridor with heat and sound. Winifred appeared beside Harrow now, her eyes bright with impossible calm. Together they spoke, voices harmonizing in that same ancient rhythm. The breath remembers, the blood remembers, the living become the memory. The air shimmered. My reflection surfaced on the polished floor between us, but it was not mine. The face that looked back was older, eyes black, mouth half open in an eternal inhale. Then everything went still. I awoke in my quarters at dawn. The phonograph sat silent on the table beside me, newly polished. A fresh cylinder waited inside its case, labeled in my own handwriting, though I had no memory of creating it. Cylinder Fay. The interview continues. My hands trembled as I reached for it. The label beneath bore a second line, faintly inscribed in red ink. For the next listener. Transcript recovered from Cylinder 6X, Asylum Archives, 1892. The days began to melt together, a feverish continuum of half-light and whispered echoes. In the asylum's cell, Dr. Harrow no longer looked at me when he spoke. His eyes seemed fixed on a point somewhere behind my shoulder, as though the past were standing just there, waiting to be remembered. He had stopped eating. He claimed food no longer filled him. He said quietly one evening that the relic was breathing through him. "It inhales when I exhale," he murmured, voice thinned to a thread. "It's not a curse, Mr. Vale. It's a communion." I could see the veins on his neck, faintly blackened beneath the skin, not diseased, but illuminated, like rivers of ink beneath parchment. He held his wrists close to his face, examining them as if they were no longer his. When I asked if he'd been wounded, he smiled. "It doesn't hurt," he said. "It just remembers where to feed." The lantern between us flickered. Shadows lengthened along the padded walls, stretching toward him. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw one shadow move differently, lagging behind the rest. He whispered again. "It's hungry, Vale, but not for flesh, for recollection." That night I dreamt of the manor again. The corridors were pulsing, alive. Portraits sighed as I passed, their eyes brightening with faint inner light. Somewhere below a hum echoed, that same subterranean rhythm I'd heard in the asylum. In the dream, I stood before Lady Winifred once more. She was not standing this time, but floating, inches above the ground, her gown weightless, her expression serene. "You still think this is madness," she said. "You still think it's memory." "What else could it be?" I asked. "Continuity," she whispered. "The breath between generations." Her gaze shifted downward. Blood, or what resembled it, was trickling across the floor, rising upward toward her outstretched hands like mist drawn by gravity reversed. "He has resisted long enough," she said. "It will take him soon." Then her voice split in two, one echoing in my head, the other whispering from the air beside me. "And when he goes, the house must feed." I woke to the sound of distant thunder, except there was no storm. The building itself groaned, timbers flexing under invisible pressure. The orderlies ran through the hall, shouting that the foundations were trembling. I followed them to Harrow's cell. He was gone. The door was locked from the inside, yet empty when forced open. The only trace left was his journal, lying open on the cot, pages soaked as though by rain. I lifted it carefully. The ink had bled across the parchment, forming patterns that looked almost deliberate. Veins, branches, or perhaps lungs. Only one page remained legible. "The relic dreams through me. I see what it wants. It wants to wake." The next entry was written not by pen, but by some scorched implement, the letters engraved into the parchment itself. She called me to the cellar again. I thought I'd escaped the moor, but the house is wherever she is. I hear the relic whisper when I close my eyes. It breathes. It remembers. I turned the page. The writing shifted, the strokes heavier, more frantic. "My blood is the key." She says the Blackmoor line is fading, that the air must be fed, that only my vitality can bridge the centuries. I told her no. The walls screamed. Then beneath that, a smear, almost like a signature, yet pulsing faintly red when the lantern passed over it. That evening, I played the last surviving fragment of Harrow's recording. The cylinder crackled, skipping, looping small phrases like fragments of thought caught in machinery. Beneath the cellar, it opened its eyes. "Winifred, I am not afraid." The floor, moving like a chest that breathes. And then, silence. Behind the static, barely audible, came a faint rhythmic sound. Inhale, exhale, timed with my own breathing until I couldn't tell which was mine. The next day, I read further into his recovered notes, those from 1877 before the asylum. He had described how Winifred led him down beneath the wine cellar to the crypt again. The manor was shaking, as though it too resisted what she intended. She said the stone must yield, he wrote, that the earth itself would open if fed correctly. He resisted the ritual. She smiled and slid her own palm across the obsidian tablet, letting the blood fall into the carved letters. "This isn't sacrifice," she told him. "It's invocation." When he tried to stop her, the entire manor began to groan. Portraits fell from walls. Dust rained from the ceiling. "Do you hear it?" she asked. "That's not the wind. That's it remembering you." He described the moment vividly. The cellar floor began to crack, revealing light instead of darkness beneath. The sarcophagi shifted as though stirred from a dream. "One lid trembled," he wrote. "The sealed one. The chains no longer cold. They moved of their own accord." Harrow fled, but not before seeing, within that faint light, the face inside the sarcophagus, his own. "It was me lying there," he scrawled. "My reflection, breathing, waiting." At this point, the handwriting grew erratic, almost unrecognizable. When I awoke, the manor was gone, or I was gone from it. Winifred was beside me. She said I had been chosen, not to die, but to persist. The air is not born, Vale. It is transferred. Then one final entry, so faint it could barely be seen except under candlelight. "The relic doesn't consume, it continues. Every memory, every listener becomes its vessel." As I finished reading, a tremor passed beneath the asylum floor. The lamp swayed. The phonograph needle scratched across its cylinder with a shriek. I looked to the window and saw fog pressing against the glass, thick as wool, pulsing faintly as though it had lungs. And in that fog, a silhouette. Harrow's form. Tall, thin, motionless, his hand raised in silent beckoning. The air turned cold enough that my breath fogged white. Somewhere below, the foundations of the asylum groaned again. That same deep, rhythmic sound, as if the building were breathing. I knew then that the manor had never truly collapsed. It had simply changed its name. The asylum has grown quieter each night since the tremors began. The staff whisper of drafts that speak, of footsteps echoing from sealed corridors. And the patients, the ones who mutter endlessly, have begun saying the same phrase in unison. The manor breathes below. I no longer sleep. The lamps flicker even when turned off. And though the corridors here are made of brick, I swear I can hear wind, soft and rhythmic, like the pulse of some enormous creature. Harrow's voice haunts the phonograph even when no cylinder plays. The needle scratches static into words that aren't recorded there. Sometimes when I play back silence, I hear him say, "You're recording me now, Thomas. Don't you see?" It continues. The head orderly, Briggs, refuses to enter Harrow's former cell. He says it smells of earth, wet, newly turned soil, though no ground lies beneath the asylum's foundations. He asked if I wanted the journal destroyed. I told him no. If the story is to consume me, I must at least write its shape before it does. Tonight, as the wind scraped across the iron bars of my window, I opened Harrow's final pages again. There, hidden in the margin, he had drawn the sigil, that thorned spiral with the open eye at its center, the one carved into the tablet at Blackmoor. Only now, the lines spiraled inward rather than outward, like the eye was closing instead of opening. Beneath it, faint but legible, a sentence. Every retelling feeds it. The candle sputtered beside me, guttering low. The air changed, thickened, like pressure beneath water. I heard the floorboards creak in sequence, one after another, as though someone walked toward me through the hallway beyond. Then a knock, 3 slow, deliberate taps. "Dr. Harrow?" I whispered. Silence. Another knock, this time softer, accompanied by a sound beneath it like breathing drawn through stone. I opened the door. The corridor beyond was empty, yet every lamp along the wall swayed as if disturbed by a passing wind. The air carried the faint scent of dust and lavender, the same perfume Lady Winifred wore in Harrow's descriptions. And then, faintly, from the end of the hall, came her voice. "Thomas Vale, you've come far enough." I should have run. Instead, I followed. The hallway seemed longer than before, each step echoing with a hollow resonance that didn't match my own pace. The walls pulsed faintly, once, twice, like the slow rhythm of a dying heart. When I reached the door at the end, I saw a faint glow beneath it. I opened it, and stepped not into a ward, but into stone steps descending into darkness. Cold air poured up like exhalation. It was the cellar again, the same as Harrow had described it, though we were miles from Blackmoor. The descent felt endless. The further I went, the stronger the hum became, a low, resonant tone vibrating through my ribs. When the steps ended, I stood once more before the 7 sarcophagi. 6 stood open. The 7th, the sealed one, bound in blackened chains, waited before me. The sigil on its surface pulsed faintly with crimson light, matching the rhythm of my own heartbeat. My voice, trembling, barely reached the stone. "Why am I here?" And from somewhere within, a whisper, faint, fractured, but clear enough to freeze me in place. "To remember." I stumbled backward, my lantern clattering against the stone. The chains stirred, sliding with the sound of rusted metal dragged through water. Then a soft creak, the lid shifting a fraction. A draft swept through the chamber, smelling of decay and roses. The carvings along the wall began to glow, one by one, revealing shapes, silhouettes of figures kneeling in worship. They had no faces, only mouths, open, round and hollow. "Do not speak its name," I whispered. And yet, the chamber wanted it spoken. Every echo, every breath seemed to shape the syllables I did not know. I turned to flee, but the stairs were gone. In their place, only a wall of smooth stone. The hum deepened. The chains began to uncoil. Then, a voice behind me, impossibly close. "Thomas." I turned. Lady Winifred stood there, untouched by time, her eyes brighter than any human's should be. "You shouldn't have come alone," she said softly. "The manor needs witnesses." "I'm not part of your bloodline," I said, voice shaking. She smiled. "You are now." Her hand reached toward my chest, and when her fingers brushed my shirt front, a pulse of light burst outward, flooding the chamber. When I awoke, I was in my cell again, or what looked like it. But the walls were no longer padded. They were stone. The air was damp, the window bricked over, and where my recorder once sat, now lay a black shard of glass, faintly warm to the touch. Inside its surface, reflections moved. Not mine, Harrow's, Winifred's, others I did not recognize. Faces shifting, merging, dissolving. They were breathing. From the hallway outside came the sound of footsteps, many, moving in unison. The orderlies entered soon after, faces blank, eyes distant. They did not speak. Each of them carried a piece of that same black glass embedded in their palms, pulsing faintly. Behind them, in the doorway, stood Harrow. He looked calm, radiant even, though his skin was pale as candle wax. He spoke gently, as one would to a child. "Do not be afraid, Thomas. The manor needed someone to remember. What have you done? What it always does. It feeds, it continues. Flesh ends, memory does not." He raised his hand. The glass in my palm, for I now realized I held it without remembering picking it up, began to glow in answer. The hum filled the air again, shaking dust from the ceiling. The floor rippled like disturbed water. "You told my story," Harrow said, "and in doing so you kept it alive." The walls trembled. The sound became deafening, a chorus of whispers rising from the stones themselves, each voice speaking the same word in 100 overlapping tones. Remember. I fell to my knees, pressing my hands over my ears. But beneath the noise, beneath the shaking, I heard something deeper, slower. The beat of an enormous heart, far below the earth, steady and patient. It wasn't the asylum collapsing. It was awakening. The final thing I recall before darkness swallowed the room was the sight of Harrow's reflection in the shard, smiling, serene, and perfectly still, even as he stepped forward and placed his hand against my chest. And then, through my own lips, a whisper, not my own. The air endures. Cylinder begins. Audible crackling, background hum. Soft footsteps. The faint strike of a match. The hiss of a lamp being lit. Vale, tired, tense. Dr. Harrow, it's nearly midnight. This will be our last recording. I need clarity, not allegory. You understand that, don't you? Harrow, quietly. Clarity is a matter of distance, Mr. Vale. Too close to the fire, and even glass becomes smoke. You've been speaking in riddles for days. You claim an entity, an heir, a relic, all without evidence. None of this can be verified. Pause. Chair creaks. A faint, rhythmic tapping, metal against wood. Dr. Harrow, none of this can be proven. Do you understand that, Doctor? Faint scraping, as though someone drags their fingernails across the table's surface. Dr. Harrow. A breath. Not quite human, slow, wet, deliberate. You're still speaking as though you are separate from it. Separate from what? The voice between us. Pause. The phonograph whines. Distortion builds. Low-frequency resonance, like wind beneath stone. Dr. Harrow, answer plainly. Who is speaking? Long pause. Static thickens. Then, faintly, another voice overlaps Harrow's, out of sync, half swallowed by interference. Unknown voice, faint, almost liquid. You kept me waiting. Sharp crack, microphone pops. Vale shouts off mic. The lamp tips, glass shattering. Vale, shaking, breathless. Who said that? Who's in here? The cylinder squeals, stuttering backward, playing fragments of earlier recordings in reverse. Words blur into echoes of beneath, remember, air. Doctor, what's happening to your face? Chair scrapes violently. Something heavy strikes the table. Then, a low moan, rising from the recorder itself. Harrow, voice distant, doubled. We are speaking from both sides now, Thomas. The interview continues through you. Stop it. Stop talking like that. This isn't real. The phonograph's hum becomes a rhythmic pulse, inhumanly deep, each beat timed to Vale's breathing. This is not real. Then, silence. The hum ceases. Only shallow breathing remains. Harrow's chair creaks once. Reality is only the part that refuses to stop repeating. He exhales. The microphone picks up faint liquid sounds, as though the walls themselves are damp and shifting. You said it wasn't human, that it fed on remembrance. You said it would end if forgotten. It doesn't end, Thomas. It merely waits for the next listener. Static grows louder. A faint rhythm beneath it, like whispering voices counting backward. Why am I hearing? Because you're listening. Another breath, close, wet, deliberate, now clearly not Harrow's. Unknown voice, distorted. We've been waiting for you, Thomas. Cylinder distortion peaks. Sound of Vale knocking over furniture, metal clatters, shouting. No, that's not his voice. Who is, The voice overlaps itself now, repeating Vale's own words back to him, phrase by phrase, half a second delayed, like an echo that learns. No, that's not his voice. Who is? Unknown voice. Is. No, his voice. Who is? The sounds fuse, looping, spiraling, forming a rhythmic pattern like breath or waves. It's remembering us in real time. Click. Vale tries to stop the recorder, but it keeps spinning. Cylinder speed increases slightly. Voices stretch, distort. Make it stop. Please, make it stop. Soft laugh, not mocking, but pitying. It doesn't stop, Thomas. It continues through every word you record. Even this moment, even your fear, becomes its voice. Distortion peaks, then cuts entirely. For several seconds, nothing but dead air. Then, faintly, like a whisper caught in a hollow chamber, "You kept me waiting." Vale screams. The recorder slams. Cylinder ends abruptly. End of Cylinder 7th, Fragment 1, filed 1892, recovered from the debris of Ward C after the incident. Archivist's note added 1910. The wax cylinder was recovered cracked and partially fused to its mechanism. When played in modern equipment, it produces a low-frequency hum inconsistent with early phonographs. Spectral analysis of the audio reveals a heartbeat-like waveform recurring every 7.4 seconds. It has not yet been determined whether this pulse originates from the recording or from the room in which it's played. Recording continues. The cylinder crackles, the sound no longer clean as though the wax itself resists remembering. Vale's account, transcript fragment. The room feels smaller. Perhaps it's the air, or perhaps it's him. Dr. Harrow has drawn inward. His body slightly turned away, yet his eyes follow me with unbroken precision. His pupils have swallowed nearly all color. He hasn't blinked since the word Blackmoor last escaped my lips. The gaslight trembles. Shadows bloom like ink stains across the padded walls. Harrow's hands twitch against the table, tendons taut, skin pale and thin as onion paper. I hear the scratching of his nails against the wood, faint, rhythmic, deliberate. "Dr. Harrow," I say again, "you were speaking of the sealed sarcophagus. You claim something woke beneath the manor." He leans closer. The phonograph catches the low scrape of chair against floor, the sound sharp enough to make me flinch. His breath smells faintly of iron and candle soot. "It didn't wake," he murmurs. "It remembered." A silence follows. The asylum hums faintly, as though the walls breathe. I glance at the orderly by the door. No movement. Even the usual scuttling of the gas pipes has stopped. Only the candle's slow hiss punctuates the room. "Remembered what?" I manage to ask. Harrow smiles, but the motion doesn't reach his eyes. When he speaks again, the voice doesn't seem entirely his. It vibrates, doubled, distorted, like two cylinders playing at once, one slightly behind the other. The covenant, the exchange, the breath that binds bone to shadow. The wax cylinder screeches faintly. The room temperature dips. My breath fogs the glass window pane behind him. He notices me shiver, and his grin widens. Faint, not cruel, but filled with knowing. Vale's diary, later annotation. At this point, I can no longer say whether I am interviewing a man or his echo. There are movements, minor, but wrong, like reflections lagging behind gestures. Once I thought I saw Harrow blink twice in different directions. "Doctor," I whisper, "you understand how this sounds." He tilts his head, bird-like, attentive. The next words emerge almost tenderly. "I understand how it feels." He opens his palm. There, pressed into his lifeline, lies a sliver of metal. No bigger than a fingernail, black as night. It hums faintly. I know the sound is impossible, yet I hear it, low, resonant, beneath language. It's the same vibration that haunted the phonograph seconds before the second voice entered. "The manor wanted to speak," he continues. "Through stone, through blood, through anyone who would listen long enough." I start to rise, perhaps out of instinct, perhaps because the light has begun to warp around him. But Harrow's voice pins me down again. "You came here to record me, Mr. Vale. But what if the recording isn't of me?" The phonograph clicks twice, unprompted. I hadn't wound it. The cylinder turns on its own, the needle dragging backward across grooves, playing a sound that shouldn't exist yet. It's a voice, not Harrow's. It's mine. "You kept me waiting," the recording says. My voice, precise, flat. But I've never said it. The air thickens. My ribs tighten as though the atmosphere itself congeals. Harrow is still staring, the faintest smile crossing his dry lips. "See?" he says softly. It learns by echo. The candle sputters out. Darkness folds inward. Total. And yet the sound continues. The whispering drag of the phonograph needle, still spinning in the dark, though the wax has run out. Transcript continues, uncertain source. Harrow, it is patient, always has been. Vale, you're not speaking to me anymore. Harrow, not to you, through you. Unintelligible whispering. Vale, there's someone else in the room. Shuffling, chair falls. Vale, light. I need light. Harrow, don't give it your name. Then, a rupture of sound. The phonograph needle tears across the wax. There's a burst of static so violent it distorts the entire recording. For 3 minutes, nothing but a low-frequency tone, somewhere between thunder and breathing. When the sound fades, the asylum clock strikes 12. Later reports, reconstructed by archivist 1901. The journalist Thomas Vale was found unconscious beside the recording equipment. The gaslight in room 19 had imploded inward, leaving soot patterns resembling handprints across the ceiling. Dr. Harrow remained seated, pulse faint, eyes open, whispering Vale's name again and again, though the man had not introduced himself before. The phonograph cylinder survived, warped, grooves melted as if by heat, yet faint words can still be heard when played backward. You cannot interview what you have already become. Vale's final note recovered from coat pocket. The interview was not about madness. It was an initiation. Whatever Harrow touched beneath Blackmoor, it needed a listener. The manor is gone, but its voice remains. Sometimes when the wind presses through old chimneys, I swear I hear it, finishing the sentence I never said. Excerpt from the private journal of Thomas Vale, London, March 3, 1893. It has been nearly a year since the interview with Dr. Edmund Harrow, or with whatever borrowed his voice. I tell myself the recording was damaged, that my memory twisted what I heard, and yet in every silence I still catch that same distant hiss, a sound not unlike the phonograph's breath before speech. They say Harrow died 3 days after our meeting. No pulse, no wound. His body was found upright in the asylum chair, eyes fixed on the corner of the room as though still speaking to someone unseen. I never attended his burial. I told myself it was because of deadlines, or distance. The truth, I was afraid that if I stood too close I might hear my own voice again. Tonight I return to Yorkshire. The ministry has given me a temporary leave of absence. Officially, I'm pursuing a historical investigation into the Blackmoor estate. An article perhaps about post-Reformation ruins and the decline of English aristocracy. Unofficially, I need to see what remains, if only to prove to myself that it's all stone and dust, not memory and myth. The train lurches north from King's Cross beneath a gray March sky. The windows shudder, coal smoke drifts like ghosts between carriages. Across from me sits an elderly woman clutching a rosary. She hums beneath her breath, tuneless, but rhythmic. It takes me several minutes to recognize the melody, the same one Harrow had hummed unconsciously during our interview. I turn my head to the window. The glass fogs with each breath, reflecting my face over the blurred countryside, a face I no longer fully trust. By dusk, I reach the village of Ravensby, 5 miles from the ruins of Blackmoor Manor, or rather, where the ruins should be. No local map marks them anymore. When I ask the station master, he frowns. "Blackmoor?" he repeats. "Never heard of it, sir. We've a Blackmoor Hill, perhaps, pasture land, but no estate that I know." He says it too quickly, as if reciting something rehearsed to make himself forget. Still, a road leads north through the fog, and I follow it. The moors have changed. Where I remember heather, there is only black soil, spongy underfoot. A fog rolls in from the east, heavy with the scent of rust and rain. I carry only my satchel, a lantern, and Harrow's final note, the one recovered from his coat pocket. Its paper is brittle now, smudged with something that looks like iron dust. Whatever it was needed a listener. The road narrows, twisting through skeletal trees. By the time night fully falls, I see a faint glow ahead. Not fire, not moonlight, but a dull phosphorescence, like foxfire in decay. And beneath it, barely visible through the mist, the outline of a gate. The Blackmoor gate still stands, iron and stone, strangled by vines. Its crest bears a sigil half eroded by time, a serpent devouring its tail. The fog parts only enough for me to glimpse the manor's silhouette beyond. Roof collapsed, tower leaning, windows hollow. Something in the air hums faintly, like the dying note of a church bell. As I approach, my lantern flickers, not from wind, but as though the flame itself fears illumination. Inside the gate, the ground softens into mud, scattered with fragments of marble and bone-white plaster. I think of Harrow's words in the interview. It remembered. Vale's journal entry continues. There are sounds under the soil, not movement exactly. Pressure, like breath caught beneath earth. When I stop walking, the ground exhales. I tell myself it's groundwater or gas. I keep moving. The entrance hall gapes open, roof gone, ivy creeping through shattered beams. The portraits Harrow described hang crooked along the walls, their colors leached, their faces blurred. One, a woman with eyes too dark to be paint, still watches with uncanny clarity. Beneath the grime, a nameplate reads, Lady Winifred Blackmoor. Her gaze follows the lantern's arc. When the light passes over her lips, I swear they glisten slightly as if damp. My family does not rest easily, she'd said to Harrow. A draft brushes past my neck, neither cold nor warm, but aware. In what remains of the grand stairwell, I find a half-collapsed door leading down. The smell grows denser, mineral, metallic, almost sweet. I know before I see it what it must be. The wine cellar, the place Harrow described in fevered detail. The descent feels endless. The deeper I go, the quieter the world becomes. The sound of my footsteps fades first, then my breath, then even the ringing in my ears. Only the pulse of my heart remains, faint, mechanical, unreal. Halfway down, the lantern dims to a mere ember, and then I hear it, a low hum rising from below the stone. Not music, not machinery. It is the same frequency that distorted the recording, the same pulse that lived in Harrow's voice. I press forward, one hand to the wall. My fingers trace symbols carved into the stone, the same runes described in the ledger of Matthias Blackmoor. They burn faintly against my skin, as though remembering contact. The stairs end abruptly in what looks like a stone door, cracked, partly ajar, something once sealed, and no longer so. For a moment I hesitate. Then I reach into my satchel and remove Harrow's old field journal, the one I stole from the Asylum archives. On the final page, a line written in haste. If you find this place again, do not open the hatch. It opens both ways. My lantern flares. Behind the door, something breathes. Not animal, not wind, but slow, measured, human. I whisper. To the air, to Harrow, to whatever might be listening. I only came to understand. The reply is almost kind. Then listen. The stone shifts. The door opens inward without effort. The stone should weigh tons, yet it yields as softly as fabric. A faint breath of air meets me, damp and old. Centuries of stillness spilling outward like a sigh. My lantern brightens, its glow bending oddly, as though light itself resists shaping this place. I step forward. The threshold feels uneven underfoot. Stone at first, then something softer, fibrous, almost organic. The chamber spreads before me in concentric arches, each one lower than the last. The walls are carved with the same sigils I traced on the stairwell, now glowing faintly red, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. In the center lies a black pool, perfectly circular, still as glass. And above it, suspended by nothing, hangs a mirror. No, not a mirror. The surface shifts like water, reflecting not the room, but the manor as it once was. Pristine, candlelit, alive. Shadows walk its corridors in reverse, moving backward through time. I see figures, indistinct, flickering, ascending stairs that no longer exist. A memory, I whisper. An imprint. But even as I say it, I realize it's more than reflection. It's recording me too, each breath, each step, etching me into its surface. The more I look, the less I feel present in my own body. A sound ripples across the water, the faint scrape of metal, like a blade drawn from a sheath. I lower my lantern toward the pool. Beneath the glassy surface, something moves, not swimming, but shifting, as though the water itself rearranges its shape. It forms the outline of a man. Not Harrow. Me. My reflection stares upward from beneath the surface. The eyes are wrong, black from edge to edge. Its mouth opens, forming words that surface as faint vibrations in the air. Not sound, but pressure. Do not listen to me. The voice is familiar. Mine, filtered through the same distortion that plagued the Asylum recording. The lantern flickers violently, throwing liquid light across the ceiling. When I glance upward again, the mirror above the pool now shows a different scene. The interview room. Harrow sits at the table. Vale, myself, across from him. But this time, it's not the past being replayed. It's the present. Harrow turns toward the mirror and smiles directly at me, as though aware of my gaze through the surface. "You came back," he says. The words echo both in the mirror and behind me. I spin around. The chamber is empty, yet the air vibrates with quiet laughter, subtle, polite, indistinguishable from breathing. I retreat a step, but the floor shifts. The stone ripples under my boots, and I realize with horror that I am standing not on rock, but on engraved tablets arranged like vertebrae, each one etched with names. Harrow, Vale, Winifred, Matthias, then names I do not know, each accompanied by a date some centuries apart. "It writes us," I whisper. Every listener. The lantern flares again. The sigils pulse faster now, as if responding to my discovery. And then, from somewhere behind the walls, a low, resonant knocking begins. Steady, deliberate, echoing through the stone like a heartbeat answering mine. Vale's account, verbatim dictation recovered via phonograph. The sound comes from behind the walls. No, within them. It's not echoing off the stone, but through it. The manor isn't built on the ground. It's grown from something else. The knocking. It's not asking to come out. It's reminding me I'm already inside. The mirror quivers. The reflection shifts again, now showing Lady Winifred Blackmoor, standing beside Harrow. Her face is pale but serene, eyes fathomless. She raises a single finger to her lips. "Silence," she mouths. "It listens when you speak." I feel the air pressure change, the chamber itself reacting to sound, as if language feeds it. My lungs burn with the need to breathe, but even breath seems sacrilegious here. It stops. The chamber exhales. The water erupts. It doesn't splash. It rises, forming columns that twist into shapes like tendrils of smoke. Within them, faces flicker, those of Harrow's workers, their mouths moving soundlessly. I see their eyes open in unison, fixed on me. Their forms blur into vapor and draw together, condensing above the pool into a single shape. Human, but indistinct, as if carved from air and shadow. When it speaks, its voice carries multiple tones, a chorus whispering through one throat. "You heard him. Now you are him." The lantern bursts. Darkness swallows the chamber. Vale's diary. Recovered fragment. Written in haste. I cannot tell what hour it is. The watch no longer runs. The air is thick and luminous, pulsing faintly as though alive. I followed the sound, the knocking, deeper still. The corridor has no end, only turns that fold back upon themselves. At times I see my own silhouette walking ahead of me, lantern in hand. It disappears each time I blink. I found the ledger again, the one Harrow described. Only now the pages are blank until I touch them. Words bloom beneath my fingertips, wet and breathing. My name repeats across every line. It isn't a place. It's a cycle. Each visitor a syllable in its prayer. It doesn't want worship. It wants memory. Somewhere above, thunder rolls, or perhaps the ground collapses. I feel vibrations through the floor, shaking the walls, dust falling like ash. The black pool glows with renewed brightness. From within, the voice returns, no longer distorted, but calm, cold, almost intimate. The manor never ended, Thomas. You did. I run, but every corridor leads back to the same chamber, the same mirror. This time it shows not the manor, not the interview, but my room in London, the phonograph, the unfinished transcript, the empty chair. Someone sits in it, me. The figure looks up from the page, listening, then slowly turns its head, as if hearing this very moment through my eyes. The final journal page ends there. Below the last line, faintly pressed into the paper, are the words,